What we were working on was her interpretation of what the killer looked like. It was not a photograph. It wasn't any other thing other than an artist's impression. I would not have based as much emphasis on that.
But it wasn't only Jeannie who had got a good look at the tall man with Helen. He had drawn himself to the attention of the bouncers at the dance hall by creating a fuss when the two women had trouble with a cigarette machine.
The situation with regards to the description given by Jean was that we more or less were told that the man's hair was red. The bouncers said it definitely wasn't. That can throw everybody off.
If Jeannie could have been mistaken about the red hair, how much reliance could be put on her evidence about John's talk of the Bible?
These Bible quotes weren't specific Bible quotes that you would need to know a lot about the Bible to speak about, and these were quotes that somebody might say in everyday normal sort of language. There's nothing unusual about them.
The fact that there was biblical quotations said at that time would appear to have been blown out of proportion, and there's maybe too much importance put on what was said in the taxi journey.
The police were getting nowhere in their search for Helen Puttock's killer. With every dead end they reached, the spectre of Bible John loomed larger over the city of Glasgow. The unwitting creation of a Bible-quoting serial killer in the minds of the public by the police and the media would haunt the west of Scotland for decades to come.
It was a very emotive name for him, you know, and it seemed to strike a chord with people, you know. It's very easy to say, oh, that's Bible John, I remember that case, rather than say, oh, I remember that murder, I wonder who that was, you know.
It was the first time, really, that people had in their minds that a serial killer was stalking the streets of Glasgow. And, I mean, for example, he was a bogeyman figure. And mothers used to give their kiddies a row and say, you better watch out or Bible John will get you.
With the face of Bible John haunting the billboards and newspapers of Glasgow like a ghost, there was one piece of evidence which was useless to police in the late 60s, a semen stain on Helen's tights. It wouldn't be until 1996, with advances in the study of DNA, that it would prove to be helpful. In a move that shocked Scotland, Strathclyde police exhumed the body of one of the case's prime suspects, John McInnes, who had committed suicide in 1980.
I think the exhumation of John McInnes was probably the grimmest and one of the most disturbing moments or periods of my life as a journalist. The exhumation was carried out in the very early morning, and that it was scarcely daylight. The temperature was way below zero. The whole area, the trees, the ground, the fences, the gravestones, everything was shrouded in hoar frost. It was truly an absolutely macabre scene. Hollywood couldn't have done it better. The coffin was discovered, dug out and removed to the city morgue in Glasgow.
Initially, I think it was thought that the DNA was so denatured that they couldn't make the minds up one way or another, but obviously DNA has made large strides in terms of what we can do with DNA nowadays, and with the tests available nowadays, the person we exhumed was not the person that was being looked for in terms of the Bible John crimes.
At that time, the test proved inconclusive, but I can tell you that the DNA stain recovered in the clothing of Helen Puttock is not John McInnes's.
Another blind alley, and 36 years later, the man known as Bible John, the killer of Helen Puttock, remains undiscovered. For all these years, the public have accepted that if the man in the taxi was traced, he would be the killer of Helen, Pat Docker and Jemima MacDonald. But could it be possible that for all this time, the search for Bible John has masked the existence of 2 or even 3 killers?
Bible John, to my mind, was a pure tabloid invention. there never was a chain of evidence which would suggest one man was solely responsible for the Bible John murders. That didn't exist. There were coincidences. You need an awful lot more than that to suggest a serial killer.
So was there such a person as Bible John, the scripture-quoting serial killer with a distinctive red hair? Today's officers reviewing the case are cautious.
I would say it was a myth. What has actually been uttered by the suspect, if you can call him a suspect, the person that accompanied Helen Puttock back in the taxi, it's nothing out of the ordinary.
Obviously the creation of the name Bible John lives long in people's memories. At the time, the three murders, the murder of Patricia Docker, Jemina MacDonald and Helen Puttock, were investigated separately. They were investigated as three separate murders. That's the case at the moment. They still are being looked at as three separate incidents.
If they were separate murders, then you would expect the killings to stop. And if it was a serial killer, as it has been portrayed, but we're treating it as three separate, then you would expect that person to go on and continue killing.
For Helen's husband and her two boys, the agony has continued long after her death.
Everything that's been written, every headline has been Bible John. What about Helen Puttock and anybody else that Bible John might have been responsible for killing? My feelings about the person that done this to my wife is one of utter disgust, how a human being can do what he done to firstly a fellow human being. But if only he knew the hurt that he caused to the amount of people whose lives he completely and utterly ruined, and whose lives will never be the same. We have been 36 years living with the horrors of that night, and I just hope and pray that as a result of this new investigation, the person responsible is finally found.